If you're here, it's probably because the title pulled you in. Maybe you've lived with someone who had secrets. Or maybe you've got a strange feeling in your gut that something's just off. Either way, I promise you this. By the end of this story, you'll understand why the police came knocking, why our peaceful neighborhood turned cold overnight, and why I can't look at my partner the same way anymore. You'll get the answers. But I need you to stay with me, because everything I'm about to share, it didn't just come out of nowhere. It's a puzzle, twisted, terrifying, and real, and every piece matters. So, if you're watching this right now, don't click away. You're here for a reason. And by the end, you'll realize, some pasts don't stay buried, they claw their way out. I want to talk to you, not as some voice behind a screen, but as someone who, not long ago, thought they knew the person they were building a life with. If you've ever trusted someone so deeply that even their silence felt safe, you'll understand why I miss the signs. And if you've ever had a single, gut-chilling moment where everything you thought you knew unraveled in front of you, then what happened to us might hit a little too close. I didn't start this story to scare you. I started it because when your world collapses and no one believes you, sometimes the only way to make sense of it all is to talk to someone who might. That someone is you. Let me set the scene for you. We had just moved into what we thought was our dream neighborhood. Quiet, tree-lined streets. Kids on bikes. Neighbors who smiled but didn't pry. It felt safe, maybe even too safe. My partner, Alex, and I had just signed the lease on a cozy two-bedroom house with a little fenced-in yard and a front porch that caught the evening sun just right. We were planning things, weekend brunches, maybe a dog, even talking about starting a family one day. I didn't know then that every word spoken on that porch would echo later in ways I couldn't imagine. At first, it was little things. You ever notice when something feels slightly off but you talk yourself out of it? Like hearing a sound in the house and telling yourself it's just the pipes? That's how it started. Alex would go silent when certain neighbors walked by. Not in a rude way, just a subtle, unnerving stillness. Then there was the man at the end of the street, always pruning his hedges, always watching us just a bit too long. One night, after we came back from grocery shopping, I could have sworn I saw someone standing across the street, just beyond the lamplight, watching our house. I told myself I was tired, that I was being paranoid. But the truth? That was the first night I locked our bedroom door. I didn't tell Alex. I didn't want them to think I was losing it. But then came the package. No return address. Just our names scrawled in red ink. Inside was a single photo. Black and white. Grainy. It was of Alex, but much younger, maybe 17 or 18. Standing in front of a building I didn't recognize. Behind them were two men, their faces scratched out with something that looked like a knife. The moment I showed it to Alex, the color drained from their face. They said nothing, just turned around, walked into the bathroom, and locked the door. I stood outside, hearing nothing, not even crying, just silence. And when they finally came out, they acted like the photo never existed. Said they threw it out. Said it was some prank. But I knew. That look in their eyes? It wasn't confusion. It was recognition. That night, I barely slept. And the next morning, the cops showed up. They didn't say much at first, just asked if we'd seen anything strange in the neighborhood, if we knew our neighbors well, if anyone had been acting suspicious. Alex played it cool, as if they had nothing to hide. But I could see the tension in their jaw, the way they gripped the edge of the countertop just a little too tightly. When the officers left, Alex sat down on the couch and didn't move for nearly an hour. Not even a word. That silence? It was screaming. I want to pause here and ask you something personal. Have you ever had that moment when someone you love becomes a stranger in front of your eyes? It doesn't happen like in the movies. It's not sudden. It's slow, like a photograph developing in reverse. The person you thought you knew starts fading, and in their place, shadows you've never seen start to form. That's what happened to me. And if you've ever been in love, truly in love, you'll know how terrifying that is. Over the next few days, the police came back. More questions. Not just for us, our neighbors too. And that's when the whispers started. People across the street avoiding eye contact. The sweet old lady next door who used to bring us cookies, suddenly crossing the street to avoid passing our gate. Even the kids stopped riding their bikes near our lawn. Something was spreading through the neighborhood, something invisible but thick like fog. And it all centered around us. I finally confronted Alex. Told them I needed the truth. All of it. I didn't care how bad it was. I just wanted to stop feeling like I was losing my mind. At first, they denied everything. Said it was just a misunderstanding, that the police were just being overly cautious because of some break-ins in the area. But when I pulled out the second package, the one that arrived with a key and a note that simply said, "Ask about New Haven," that's when everything changed. Their hands trembled. Their voice cracked. And for the first time, Alex looked scared. Not just afraid, truly terrified. They grabbed the key, stuffed it in their pocket, and told me to get in the car. No explanation. No time to think. Just that haunted look in their eyes and the words, "If we don't go now, it's going to be too late." We drove for hours, no music, no talking. Just the sound of tires against asphalt and 1,000 thoughts racing through my head. What was New Haven? Who were the men in that photo? And why were the neighbors acting like they knew something we didn't? When we finally stopped, it was at an old motel on the edge of a rundown industrial town. The kind of place where the vending machine only takes exact change, and the ice machine hasn't worked in years. Alex used the key to open the room at the very end of the hall. Inside was a dusty box, labeled with their name, and a lock. Not the kind you'd use for something normal. This was a reinforced metal case with a fingerprint scanner. Alex opened it with a trembling hand. What was inside? I still can't tell you yet. Not because I don't want to, but because I need you to understand what came before it first. You need the whole picture. Every twisted part of it. Because the second we opened that box, everything changed. But even worse? Back home, the neighbors had already started telling their version of the story to the cops. And none of it was true. Back at the motel, as the dust settled from the lid being lifted, I watched Alex's face twist into something I hadn't seen before, grief mixed with panic, as if they were staring into a memory they'd spent years trying to erase. Inside the box were papers, yellowed and fragile, stacked beneath an envelope stamped with a date from 12 years ago. Alongside it, a small silver locket with initials etched into the back, CA, lay on top of a faded newspaper clipping showing the aftermath of a fire. The headline read, "New Haven Youth Center Burns, 2 Missing." I reached out instinctively, but Alex stopped me. "We shouldn't be touching any of this," they said, barely above a whisper. "Not unless we're ready to know what really happened." And just like that, the mystery I thought I was trying to solve about our neighborhood became something much bigger, darker, something that stretched back into a life Alex never told me about. And maybe, just maybe, into something criminal. Driving back the next day felt different. Our home didn't feel like ours anymore. The street felt narrower, colder. We noticed a subtle change in how people looked at us, like we were being watched for reasons we didn't understand. That same man with the hedge trimmers now seemed to pause deliberately as we drove by, never breaking eye contact. The mailman who used to wave didn't even look up. And parked across from our house was a car we didn't recognize, tinted windows, engine idling. Nothing obvious, nothing illegal, but it sat there for hours, and when I walked toward it to get a better look, it slowly rolled away. Alex tried to stay composed, but I caught them checking the locks on the doors 3 times that night. Whatever they had been involved in, whatever New Haven meant, it had reached us here. The past had followed us home. That week, the police came again, this time with more pointed questions. Had Alex ever lived in Connecticut? Had either of us ever visited a youth center in New Haven? Did we recognize any of the names they read from a list, all of which Alex claimed not to know? But I saw the flicker in their eyes. One name made their breath catch. Callie Andrews. I didn't say anything then, but I would later Google that name in secret. What I found wasn't much, just a short article from a community newsletter about a teen who went missing the night of the fire at the youth center. No body ever found. Presumed dead. I wanted to believe this was some terrible coincidence, but coincidences don't make people lock themselves in motel rooms with boxes of evidence no one's supposed to see. What made everything worse was how quickly the neighborhood started turning. It started subtly, Trash bins knocked over, our recycling stolen, small things missing from our porch. Then someone slashed the tires on Alex's car in the middle of the night. When we reviewed our security footage, the cameras had mysteriously gone black between 1:12 and 2:04 a.m. Alex swore they didn't recognize the figure that slipped into the shadows on the edge of the footage, but I wasn't so sure. And neither, it seemed, were the police. The lead detective started asking about our neighbors. Which ones had we spoken to? Did any seem particularly interested in our past? Were we aware that someone nearby had once worked in law enforcement? I started doing my own digging. I downloaded a public app that lets you check arrest records and background info. A few clicks, and I was face to face with some unsettling truths. The man with the hedge trimmers? His name was Raymond Bledsoe. Former parole officer. Forced into early retirement after a case went wrong involving a juvenile in New Haven. A decade ago. He moved to our neighborhood around the same time Alex and I started dating, years before we even thought about buying a house here. The more I looked, the more suspicious it seemed. But when I brought it up to Alex, they shut down. Said Raymond didn't mean harm. That he was just doing what he thought was right. I didn't like the way they said that. But then there was Eleanor from across the street. Sweet, elderly, always handing out baked goods, until she stopped. I once caught her standing at her window with binoculars, aimed directly at our front yard. She ducked as soon as I made eye contact, but it was clear. She was watching. A few days later, I overheard her talking to another neighbor about those two down the street who brought the police into our lives. I realized something then. The neighborhood wasn't just reacting. They were preparing. For what, I wasn't sure, but it felt orchestrated, like something was being covered up and we had wandered straight into the middle of it. I kept asking Alex to explain, but all I got were pieces. They said they had volunteered at the New Haven Center when they were a teen. That something happened, something involving a girl, someone who disappeared, someone everyone assumed was dead. But Alex insisted they weren't involved. That they were just close to the person who was. That's when I started to question everything. Was Alex protecting someone? Or lying to protect themselves? One night, while Alex was asleep, I went through their phone. I didn't want to. I'd never done it before. But there were too many things that didn't add up. In the deleted messages folder, I found something, just one thread, but enough to shake me. It was a message from an unknown number. They're watching. Keep quiet. You know what happened to Callie. I stared at that message for what felt like an hour. My hands trembled as I scrolled up, but the earlier messages were gone. Just that one warning. That one threat. And suddenly, the silence from our neighbors, the vandalism, the constant presence of the same cars parked nearby, it all took on a new meaning. This wasn't paranoia. This was a message. We considered leaving, packing up and starting over. But where would we go? Alex said it wouldn't matter. They'll find us, they said. Just like last time. That's when I realized there was no escaping this. Not until we knew the full truth. And that truth was buried somewhere deep, maybe even in this neighborhood, among the very people smiling at us just days ago. Someone here knew what happened to Callie Andrews. Someone knew why the youth center burned. And someone wanted to make sure that Alex never talked about it again. But the police weren't backing down either. They called again, this time saying new information had surfaced. That one of our neighbors had made an anonymous report. That Alex wasn't just a witness from the past, they might be a person of interest. When I asked what that meant, they refused to elaborate, only saying they were reopening the case. The moment I told Alex, they shut down completely. Stared out the window for hours. Wouldn't eat. Wouldn't speak. That silence returned. The same one I'd heard when they saw that first photo. The same silence that seemed to carry more weight than words ever could. I tried to piece it together. Who could have reported them? Raymond, the former parole officer? Eleanor, the sweet-faced spy? Or maybe even someone we hadn't noticed, someone blending in perfectly while manipulating things from the shadows. Maybe the police were being used. Maybe this wasn't just about justice, it was revenge. Or a cover-up. Or something else entirely. And just when I thought things couldn't get any stranger, we found the envelope on our porch. No stamp. No return address. Just a single word written in thick black ink. Run. Inside, there was a flash drive. And what was on that drive? That's where everything changes. When we plugged in the flash drive, the air in the room turned cold. It wasn't just the contents. It was the feeling that we were doing something we weren't supposed to, like crossing into territory meant to stay hidden. The file opened automatically, no password, no title, just a timestamped video from over a decade ago. It was grainy, shot in what looked like a basement or a storage room, with flickering fluorescent lights overhead. There were 3 teenagers visible, 2 boys and a girl. One of the boys was unmistakably Alex, younger, thinner, with longer hair and a nervous expression that kept glancing off.
Camera.
The girl sat on the floor, legs tucked in, arms crossed tightly, her eyes red and swollen, like she'd been crying. I didn't recognize her, but a chill ran down my spine when I saw the initials on the hoodie she wore, C.A. Callie Andrews. The third boy paced behind them, angry, restless, clearly saying something, though the video had no sound. Then suddenly, the screen cut to black. The clip was less than 30 seconds long. Alex didn't move. Their hands were clenched in fists, pressed tightly against their legs. I asked what it meant, why they had that flash drive, why someone would leave it for us. But they wouldn't answer. They just stared at the screen like it was haunting them. That's when I realized Alex had been hiding something even deeper than I imagined. Not just a connection to Callie, but a moment, a night, a decision they'd never spoken of. I asked again, more forcefully this time. And finally, with a shaky breath, they said, "That night, I thought I was doing the right thing.
I didn't know it would end like that."
Before I could press for more, they stood up and walked out of the room. The next morning, the flash drive was gone. I tore the place apart, checked every drawer, every pocket, every trash can, but it had vanished. Alex swore they didn't take it, but I could tell they were lying. Their eyes didn't meet mine, and their voice had that soft, rehearsed tone I'd started to recognize as their shield. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Something told me pushing now would only make them pull away more. But losing the drive was a blow. It was the only tangible proof we had that something had happened to Callie, that someone else was involved, that the truth wasn't just some paranoid fantasy I'd built up in my head. And without it, we were back in the dark. That same day, I noticed another new car parked down the block. This one was different, sleek, black, tinted. Same model as an unmarked police vehicle. But when I casually walked by to peek inside, there were no radio units, no badges. Just an envelope sitting in the passenger seat. As I approached, the car started and drove off without a word. That night, we got a letter slid under our door. It wasn't typed. It was handwritten, shaky, almost childlike. "You're getting too close. Let it go before someone gets hurt." I showed it to Alex. They didn't look surprised, just tired. "It's starting again," they said. I began to question everyone. Was it one of the neighbors sending these messages? Was it someone from Alex's past? Or worse, was it someone pretending to help us while quietly working against us? We thought about going to the police, showing them the video and the letter, but Alex refused.
"They're part of it," they said.
"They covered it up once. They'll do it again." I wanted to believe that was paranoia, trauma talking. But something about the way the detectives danced around our questions, the way they never followed up on key leads, made me hesitate. Maybe Alex was right. Maybe this was bigger than just one missing girl. Maybe this was about silencing the people who knew what really happened to her. In desperation, I decided to reach out to the only person left who might have answers, Raymond Bledsoe. I approached him on his porch, and to my surprise, he invited me inside without hesitation. The inside of his home was covered in case files, newspaper clippings, maps, and red string connecting photos to dates to headlines. It looked like something out of a crime documentary. He poured his coffee and sat me down. "I figured you'd come," he said. "You've been chasing ghosts without knowing their names." I asked him about Callie, about Alex, about the youth center fire. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he handed me a folder. Inside were transcripts, witness statements from the night of the fire. One in particular stood out. A girl named Melanie said she saw 3 people leaving the building after the fire started, one of them dragging a 4th person who wasn't moving. "What happened to the 4th person?" I asked. Raymond looked me dead in the eyes. That's what I've been trying to find out for 10 years, he said. And your partner, they're not just a witness. They were one of the last people seen with her. When I got home, I confronted Alex again. I showed them the folder. I told them everything Raymond had said. And that's when the mask finally cracked. Alex admitted they had lied, but not to protect themselves. To protect someone else. She didn't die in the fire, they said. At least, not right away. She got out. Someone took her. Someone from the center. But I couldn't say anything back then. If I had, they would have killed me too. I pressed them. Who was it? Who took her? But before Alex could answer, our power suddenly went out. Total darkness. Seconds later, the doorbell rang. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and crept to the front window. No one was there. Just the wind, the empty porch, and a shadow moving in the trees. Then my phone buzzed. An unknown number. The message read, "You're asking the wrong questions." And attached was a photo. It was taken that same night. But it wasn't of Alex. It was of me, standing in our living room, looking out the window. From outside, the moment I saw that photo of myself, taken from outside, in the very same moment I thought I was alone, it felt like something inside me cracked. It was no longer just about Alex's past. Somehow, whoever was behind this had shifted focus. Now I was being watched. And not just randomly or passively. They had timed it perfectly, chosen that instant to show me they were closer than I ever imagined. Whoever they were, they had access, not just to information but to us. To our home. To our routines. I didn't even have time to show Alex the photo because my phone lit up again, this time with a name I hadn't seen in years. Natalie Perez. Natalie and I had grown up together back in Michigan. We'd fallen out of touch years ago after she moved away, but we'd recently reconnected on social media. A few casual messages. A couple of old memories. Nothing major. So when she called out of the blue, I nearly didn't answer. But something told me I should. When I picked up, her voice was shaky, almost panicked, like she'd been crying. She asked if I was alone. When I said yes, she said, "You need to tell me the truth. Are you involved in anything happening around New Haven?" I was stunned. How would she even know to ask that? She told me she had just received a manila envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo of her and me from years ago, standing on the steps of our high school. Scribbled across it in red ink were the words, "Ask them what really happened." She said she didn't understand what it meant, didn't know what to do. But the note had included a burner phone and a pre-recorded message from a distorted voice. It simply said, "You are closer than you think." Natalie was terrified, and frankly, so was I. It meant this wasn't just about Alex anymore. Someone was dragging people from my past into this mess. And for what? To rattle me? To isolate us? Or because Natalie knew something she hadn't realized? I asked Natalie if she remembered anyone from New Haven, any connection that could explain the package, and that's when her voice went completely still. After a long pause, she said, "There was a guy I dated briefly. A summer fling. I think his name was Jordan. He volunteered at a youth center, talked about a girl who disappeared. I didn't take him seriously at the time, thought it was just teenage drama. But now I'm not so sure." She said she'd try to find some of the old messages, but then she whispered something that sent chills down my spine. "They're trying to erase it. My Facebook messages, anything with his name, are gone." We hung up, and I immediately told Alex. Their face went pale when I said Jordan's name. "Jordan Becker?" they asked. "Tall. Wore that hideous leather jacket all the time?" When I nodded, Alex sat down slowly, like the weight of the name alone had winded them. He was the one who knew everything. The night of the fire, he said he saw someone dragging Callie out through the maintenance tunnel. He swore it was a staff member, someone in charge. He wanted to go to the police, but he disappeared before he could. According to Alex, Jordan had never been heard from again. No reports. No missing persons case. It was as if he'd been swallowed whole by the same silence now surrounding us. Everything I thought I knew was shifting. If Jordan was somehow involved and now Natalie had been contacted, That meant whoever was behind this had access to not only Alex's past but mine too. They weren't just reviving old ghosts, they were weaving them into a new, more dangerous story. That same night, another message arrived, this time in our mailbox. It was a torn journal page, the paper brittle and browned by age. The handwriting was feminine, rushed, clearly emotional. It read, "He promised to protect me, but they're all liars. If you find this, don't trust the man with the keys. He was always watching, even when we thought we were safe." There was no signature, just a date, June 14th, 2013. The same day the New Haven Youth Center burned. Alex looked like they'd seen a ghost when they read it. They didn't say anything for a while, then muttered, "That's Callie's handwriting." I asked how they could be sure, and they said she used to write letters to herself in her journal, a habit she'd picked up in therapy. She said it helped her feel seen, Alex said, eyes misting. Like someone was listening, even if no one really was. This meant Callie had survived the fire, at least long enough to write that message. But who was the man with the keys? My mind immediately jumped to Raymond. He had always seemed to know more than he should. His house full of notes, the way he welcomed me without hesitation. Was he tracking us all along? Feeding us just enough truth to keep us close, but never the whole story? Or was he part of something deeper? But then came the biggest contradiction yet. That same night, a package was left at our back door. Inside was a USB drive and a note that read, "Stop blaming Alex. Ask what they did in Connecticut." It was a short video clip, security camera footage from a hospital dated 3 days after the fire. The angle showed a girl limping through a back hallway, wearing the same hoodie Callie had on in the basement video. But the timestamp was impossible to ignore. She was alive after the fire. Someone had helped her. Someone had hidden her. And the person walking just a few steps behind her was Alex. I turned to them, confused, betrayed, desperate for answers. Alex didn't deny it. They just said, "I had no choice. I made a deal I thought would save her." But what kind of deal? And with who? Before they could answer, we heard a loud knock at the front door. Not the police. Not the neighbors. It was Natalie. Tears on her face. And blood on her hands. Natalie stumbled through the door, clutching her side, her breathing sharp and uneven as if she'd run for blocks without stopping. Her face was pale, smeared with dirt and streaked with tears, and her hands, shaking, bloodied, clutched something tight in her fist. I rushed to her side, helped her into the kitchen, and tried to make sense of what I was seeing, but her words tumbled out in a panic. She said someone had followed her, that she'd noticed the same black SUV tailing her car since she left work. At first, she thought it was paranoia, just nerves after the envelope. But then the SUV had pulled into her driveway behind her, headlights off, engines still running. She ran through her neighbor's yard, cut across the park, and came straight to us. What terrified me most wasn't just what she said. It was the raw terror in her eyes. Natalie was not someone who frightened easily. And now, she looked like she had stared straight into something she didn't understand. In her hand was a small, cracked phone, not hers. She said she found it just outside her door, half buried under the edge of her welcome mat. It had only one contact saved, a single outgoing call placed just hours ago to a number listed as Dr. The call had lasted 47 seconds. There were no messages, no photos, no browser history. Just that one call, and a memo in the Notes app that read, "If they ask about room 6, deny everything, especially the nurse." She said she didn't know what it meant, but when she found the phone, she heard footsteps coming from the side of her house, and she didn't wait to find out who they belonged to. She had no idea who the phone belonged to or how it ended up under her mat, but something about the note made my stomach twist. I locked the doors, pulled the blinds, and turned off the lights. Every instinct in me screamed that we were being hunted, watched. Not randomly, not coincidentally, but deliberately. Someone was trying to send a message, and the message was clear. Stop digging. I tried to get Alex to talk, to explain what the reference to room 6 might mean, but they were already backing into themselves again, that blank, distant stare returning. Natalie sat in silence, one arm pressed tightly around her ribs, her other hand cradling the burner phone from the envelope earlier. I wanted to feel safe, to believe we could figure this out before it got worse, but in that moment, I realized how far we had spiraled into something that no longer played by normal rules. This wasn't just a cold case. This was a trap, and we were already inside it. At midnight, the power went out again. Not the whole block this time. Just our house. I checked the circuit breaker, but everything looked intact. I tried to call the power company, but my phone had no service. Natalie's was dead. Alex's had been powered off for hours. We lit candles and sat in the living room in silence, the only sound the wind tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. I tried to calm my thoughts, but they were racing. Was it possible someone had tampered with the lines? Was there someone outside right now, watching us again? Was this their way of tightening the grip? I stood up to peek through the front curtain, but Alex grabbed my wrist. "Don't," they whispered. "That's what they want." The tension in the room was suffocating. We were prisoners in our own home, too scared to turn on the lights, too terrified to speak above a whisper. Every creak in the floor, every gust of wind felt like the precursor to something breaking in. I kept replaying the message in my mind, ask what they did in Connecticut. And now this new clue, room 6, and the nurse, pieces of a puzzle that didn't want to be solved. It wasn't until I went into the bedroom to grab a blanket that I noticed something that nearly made me drop to my knees. My journal, the one I'd been using to keep track of everything, was gone. I had hidden it under the mattress, behind the wooden slats. No one knew where it was, not even Alex. And yet, it had vanished. Pages filled with names, dates, theories, copies of the photos and notes we had received. All of it gone. I tore the room apart in a frenzy, praying it had just slipped between furniture or been misplaced, but it was useless. Someone had taken it. Someone had been inside. I hadn't left the door unlocked, and the windows were all shut. There were no signs of forced entry. And yet someone had been here, close enough to touch our things, to steal from under my nose. It was no longer about warnings. This was a declaration. We're already in your home. We're already in your head. I ran back into the living room, breathless, told Alex and Natalie everything. Alex looked crushed, as if a lifeline had been cut. Natalie sat motionless, her eyes glassy with shock. And then, with a quivering voice, she said something that hadn't occurred to me until that moment. What if they're not just watching? What if one of us is telling them? It hit like a punch. Could someone inside our circle be feeding them information? Was it possible this went deeper than just being watched? The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd felt. We all stared at one another, the warmth of trust slowly draining from the room. I looked at Natalie, at Alex, and felt a sickening pit grow in my stomach. Had I been so focused on the threats outside that I'd ignored the possibility of betrayal from within? Natalie had shown up with blood on her hands, a burner phone, and a story that raised more questions than it answered. Alex had lied from the start and continued to keep key parts of their past hidden. And now I was the one being photographed, followed, targeted. What if that meant I was the last piece of the puzzle? Not the narrator of the story, but its endpoint? Suddenly, Natalie stood up, said she needed air. She walked to the back door, fumbled with the lock, and stepped out into the night. I waited for her to come back. 5 minutes. 10. 15. I opened the door and stepped outside. She was gone. The backyard was still, almost too still, the way it gets before a storm rolls in. I stepped onto the damp grass, calling Natalie's name, but only the trees answered, their leaves rustling like whispers in the dark. The gate at the back of the yard creaked open just slightly, swaying in the breeze. It had been locked since we moved in, I knew that for a fact. I walked toward it, flashlight from my phone trembling in my grip, scanning for any sign of her. But there were no footprints, no broken twigs, no blood trail this time. It was like she had simply evaporated into the night. My heart pounded not just from fear, but from the gnawing suspicion that something about all of this was deeply wrong, as if we'd been looking at the story from the wrong side all along. And then my phone buzzed again. No number. Just a message. You let her in. That was your mistake. I froze. The words echoed in my mind. You let her in. Not she forced her way in. Not she stumbled here by accident. You let her in. It hit me then, not just the phrasing, but the implication behind it. Someone wanted me to believe that Natalie hadn't come here to be saved. She had come here with purpose. And maybe not all of it was innocent. I ran back inside, locked the door behind me, and told Alex what had happened. Their face was unreadable, too unreadable. I asked again for what felt like the 100th time what really happened in New Haven. Who took Callie? What deal they made? And instead of answering, they did something I didn't expect. They stood up, walked to the closet, reached into the back of the top shelf, and pulled out a dusty shoebox I had never seen before. You deserve to know now, they said, and their voice cracked in a way that didn't sound like fear. It sounded like guilt. Inside the box were hospital bracelets, 3 of them. One with Alex's name, one with Callie's, and the third with mine. I couldn't speak. My mind couldn't even process the question fast enough to form words. My name, my date of birth, a patient record number. It was all there. And not from recently. From over a decade ago. What is this? I asked, the words barely leaving my lips. Alex sat down slowly and looked at me the way someone looks when they know the truth is about to shatter the world you thought you lived in. You were there, they said. Not just as a visitor. Not just in the background. You were admitted to the New Haven facility 2 weeks before the fire. You and Callie were in the same therapy group. That's how you met. My entire body went cold. I couldn't breathe. That's not possible, I said, shaking my head. I've never been to Connecticut in my life. Alex shook theirs. That's what they wanted you to believe. After the fire, they separated the survivors. Told us it was for our safety. Some of us were given new identities. Some of us were told lies about where we came from. Some of us were told we'd imagined it all. You were one of the ones they buried. The ones they didn't want to remember what happened. I staggered back, reaching for anything to hold on to, but the room felt like it was spinning. This wasn't just about Alex hiding a dark past. This wasn't about a mystery neighbor, a suspicious video, or a missing girl. This was about me. My entire life had just become suspect. My memories, my childhood, everything I thought had shaped me into who I was, none of it could be trusted anymore. I remembered vague flashes of something now that Alex had said it. A hallway that smelled of bleach. A red swing set behind a chain-link fence. A girl with dark hair and tired eyes who used to trace shapes on her knees when she was nervous. Callie. I didn't just know her from Alex. I knew her from my own buried past. Alex said the flash drive that went missing didn't disappear. They hid it again because on it there was more than the basement footage. There was a voice recording from a group therapy session. One where a doctor could be heard asking a group of patients, including Callie, Alex, and me, about an incident involving a staff member known only as Dr. M. In the background, someone said, "He watches us at night. He comes in with his keys." Another voice added, "He told me I'd forget everything when I left." That's when I remembered the note Natalie brought. Don't trust the man with the keys. Everything was falling apart in real time. I didn't know what was real, who to trust, what to believe. But there was one thing I knew for certain. I had been part of whatever happened that night. I hadn't just been dragged into Alex's mystery. I'd been living inside it. And the worst part? Someone out there still remembered who I used to be. And they weren't done with me yet. Just as I turned to ask Alex how much more they had kept hidden, a knock came at the door. This time, it wasn't a letter, or a package, or a photo. It was a person. Natalie. Completely dry. Completely calm. And smiling. Like she'd never been afraid at all. Natalie stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, as if the threshold of our home was just another stage for whatever game she'd been playing from the start. Her smile was too calm, too deliberate, the same kind you see on people who already know what cards you're holding before you even glance at yours. Alex instinctively stepped in front of me, blocking my path to her. There was a strange flicker in their eyes, fear, familiarity, maybe even recognition. Natalie glanced around slowly, then let out a soft laugh like the whole night had been a performance only she knew the ending to. "I figure it was time," she said, laying the burner phone on the coffee table like it was a gift. We've wasted enough time pretending we didn't know where this was heading. I demanded to know what she meant, but she only looked at me with something close to pity. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded manila envelope, sliding it toward me. You're going to want to read this before the rest of them find out. Inside were a series of documents, medical files, court records, a signed non-disclosure agreement from over a decade ago. At the top of the stack was a familiar name.
Mine.
Only it wasn't the name I grew up with. It was the one I had never heard before that moment. A name connected to a child admitted to the New Haven facility under a protective identity following a sealed abuse investigation. I stared at it, not understanding, not believing. That was you, Natalie said softly, her tones suddenly devoid of all that smug composure. You were never just a patient. You were the whistleblower. I couldn't breathe. I tried to form a response, to push the words out of my throat, but everything inside me felt paralyzed. My hands trembled as I flipped through the rest of the documents, signed evaluations from staff psychologists, therapy logs that described my memories as fragmented, unreliable. There were notes suggesting I had witnessed things no child should, but that my story had been too dangerous to make public. I wasn't just a piece of the past. I had been central to it. Someone had tried to erase me from it all, not to protect me, but to protect themselves. That's when Natalie dropped the real bomb. You were the key witness they were afraid would talk. That's why they started wiping everything. That's why they're watching you now. They don't care about Alex. Not really. You were the one they buried. You were the one who almost destroyed them. I turned to Alex, my head spinning, the room collapsing in on itself. Did you know? I asked, and the silence that followed was the only answer I needed. Their face twisted, not in shock but shame.
Pain.
And then they nodded. I didn't want you to remember, they whispered. You were finally happy. You had a life. What good would it have done to drag you back into all of that? My world tilted. This wasn't just betrayal. It was the loss of an entire identity. Everything I had trusted, every memory I had counted on to define who I was, it was all in question now. Natalie stepped forward, her voice suddenly turning hard, businesslike. You don't have time to process this. They're going to release a story. They've prepped a narrative. Alex is going to be their fall person. The story will say they lured you into this mess, that they fed you lies, manipulated your memory. The documents in your hand? They're going to disappear. If you want the truth to survive, if you want people to know what really happened to Callie, to you, to all of us, you're going to have to act now. But that means making a choice. She handed me a flash drive. This contains footage from room 6. The real footage. The kind they buried. If you leak this, it will blow everything open, lawsuits, criminal charges, full-on media frenzy. But it will also put a target on your back. Not just you, everyone you care about. They'll come at you hard. You'll lose your job, your name, your safety. You might even lose Alex. She paused, her gaze settling into something colder. Or you can give it back. Say nothing. Let the story unfold the way they've written it. You walk away clean. Live the rest of your life never having to worry about who's watching. And no one will ever know what happened to Callie or to you. The silence that followed was unbearable. Alex turned away, their jaw clenched, their eyes wet. I knew what they wanted. They wanted me to stay quiet. They wanted us to escape this, vanish into the background, pretend it never touched us. But Natalie's words dug into me like a blade. I had asked for the truth. I had dug through every lie, every shadow. And now that I had it, I wasn't sure I could carry the weight of what it demanded. I thought about Callie, her name carved into that necklace, her voice in that therapy session, the journal entry begging someone not to trust the man with the keys. What if this was my only chance to give her story an ending? But at what cost? I looked at Natalie and asked the one question I hadn't dared to before. Why are you helping me? Her expression didn't change, but her words did. Because I was in room 6 too. Before I could ask anything more, the house phone, silent for years, rang for the first time. And on the other end of the line was a voice I hadn't heard since I was a child. A voice I thought had died in that fire. The phone's ring cut through the silence, like a razor. I stood frozen, my hand hovering over the receiver as if touching it might ignite something I couldn't undo. Natalie and Alex watched me, neither daring to speak. My heart pounded so violently I thought it might burst from my chest. And then I picked it up. A voice, low, calm, male, spoke my name, not the one I'd been using, but the one from the files Natalie had shown me. "It's been a long time," he said, with the kind of unsettling familiarity that made my skin crawl. "You've remembered more than we anticipated. That's unfortunate." My knees buckled slightly. I didn't recognize the voice on the surface, but deep inside, somewhere in the corners of memory I'd worked hard to forget, I did. Dr. M. The man with the keys. The one Callie had warned about. The one they all said had vanished in the fire. But he hadn't. "You were never supposed to get that far," he continued. "We let Alex live because they cooperated. We let Natalie back in so we could manage the story.
But you?
You've always been unpredictable. Dangerous. Like Callie." He said her name the way people say trash they've thrown away. Like she was nothing. And suddenly, all the rage I'd been burying for days erupted to the surface. I screamed into the receiver, demanded to know what happened to her, what he did, why he had chosen us. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't defend himself. He only said, "She refused the deal. She tried to run, and that left us no choice." I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. The truth was right there, confirmed in his own words. They'd silenced her.
Covered it all up.
And they'd been monitoring every step I'd taken since I began digging. Natalie rushed forward to hang up the phone, but I stopped her. "Why now?" I asked him. "Why contact me at all?" His answer was chilling. "Because this is your final warning. If you release that footage, you won't just ruin lives, you'll erase them. Including yours." Then the line went dead. The room descended into chaos. Alex started packing, frantic, ready to disappear again. Natalie tried to convince me to upload the files immediately, send them to every news outlet, every whistleblower subreddit, every journalist she had connections with. But I couldn't move. My entire body felt like it had been buried under the weight of 1,000 realities colliding at once. Somewhere, deep in my psyche, I knew this moment was always coming, the reckoning. And it would not leave any of us unchanged. We made the decision at dawn. Natalie, using an encrypted laptop she had stashed in her car, uploaded the Room 6 footage to multiple sites: YouTube, Twitter, Reddit, Signal, Dropbox, everything. She timed it to go live at 8 a.m. There was no turning back. The video was raw, unfiltered, horrifying. It showed patients, children, being led into what looked like a therapy room, only for the camera to reveal restraints bolted to the floor. Dr. M's face appeared briefly in the corner of one clip, speaking calmly to a crying girl who matched Callie's description. "This is for your own good," he told her as he closed the door. We watched the upload bar inch closer to 100%, a countdown not to freedom, but to war. But just before it completed, a window popped up, remote access detected. Transfer halted. The screen went black. Then a message appeared. You were warned. Natalie tried to override it, but her hands froze. "They're in the system," she said, her voice shaking. "They're wiping everything." Alex grabbed the flash drive, ready to run, but the house suddenly shook, an explosion of sound and glass. The front door had been blown open. 2 men, faces covered in tactical gear, stormed in with weapons drawn.
"Get down. Now."
I screamed for Alex and Natalie, diving behind the couch. But before I could reach them, one of the men grabbed me by the collar and yanked me upright. "Where's the drive?" he growled. My mind raced. Could I lie? Could I stall? But before I could speak, a loud crash came from the hallway. Another figure appeared, older, heavy-set, dragging a limp body behind him. It was Raymond Bledsoe, bleeding, bruised, but alive. And in his hand was a pistol. "Put the weapons down," he roared, "or I blow the whistle myself." The men hesitated, clearly not expecting resistance. Raymond had something they feared, backup files, maybe, or leverage none of us had known about. But before anything could be negotiated, before any threats could be exchanged, one of the men raised his weapon and fired. The shot tore through Raymond's shoulder. He crumpled to the ground, dropping the gun, the flash drive skidding across the floor toward me. I lunged, grabbing it just as Alex tackled one of the intruders and Natalie kicked the laptop toward the hallway. The fight was messy, desperate, human. But we were no match. They pinned us down in seconds, restrained us with zip ties, and ripped the flash drive from my hand. And then something unexpected happened. The second man pulled off his mask. It was Jordan Becker.
Alive.
Not vanished. Not dead. Working with them. Alex's gasp was audible. Natalie screamed. But I just stared. Because in that moment, everything crystallized. Jordan wasn't their puppet. He was their insurance policy. Their cleaner. Their watcher. The one who made sure anyone who got too close paid the price. And he looked at me with something I didn't expect, regret. You should have stayed buried, he said softly. You were safer when you didn't know. But before he could destroy the drive, before they could drag us away, the laptop Natalie had kicked earlier let out a sharp beep. The upload had resumed. And finished. It had been syncing in the background the whole time. Across the country, notifications were already lighting up. Asterisk leaked footage from New Haven Asylum exposes years of abuse. Asterisk the video had gone viral in seconds. It was trending. Hashtag Room 6 exploded across YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok. There was no stopping it now. The truth was out. Jordan stared at the screen. You have no idea what you've done, he said. But the real twist hadn't come yet. As sirens echoed in the distance, real ones this time, Raymond, barely conscious, looked at me and whispered the words I would never forget. Callie's not dead. My entire body locked. I turned to him, unsure if I heard right. But his eyes were clear. He nodded. They kept her, he said. She's still alive. Somewhere underground. She was the one who got the footage out. She's been watching this unfold the whole time. And as the men fled and police finally arrived, I realized this wasn't the end of a story. It was only the beginning. Because now we had to find her. And I had to face the one truth I hadn't been ready for. She might not want to be found. It took 6 days before they confirmed what I had already started to believe deep in my gut, that Callie was alive. Not just a whisper in memory, not just a victim in a buried file, but a living person who had somehow survived the fire, the system, the erasure. The footage she'd leaked had triggered a full-blown federal investigation. The Department of Justice had opened inquiries into the New Haven facility and several private institutions that had once been under its umbrella. Whistleblower protections were reinstated, buried patient records were finally unsealed, and mainstream news outlets like CNN, NBC, and Vice News began piecing together the systemic cover-up that had lasted over a decade. Room 6 became the top trending keyword across YouTube and TikTok, not just a hashtag, but a rallying cry for survivors who had long been told their pain was a delusion. My story, Alex's, Natalie's, it wasn't just ours anymore. It belonged to every person who'd ever been silenced, manipulated, or discarded by institutions built to heal. Still, for all the noise and headlines, the truth we cared about most remained elusive. Callie. Her name echoed in every corner of my mind as I replayed Raymond's final words in the ambulance before they sedated him. He hadn't given a location. Just a name. The Pines, a rural rehabilitation complex in upstate Vermont that had been closed for structural damage over 7 years ago, but according to what Raymond whispered, it had never truly shut down. Only rebranded. And according to him, that's where they'd taken her after the fire. That's where she'd been kept. The idea of her being locked away for so long, without a voice, without even the dignity of her name being remembered, it haunted me. Natalie disappeared 2 days after the leak. She left behind a note. It's time to finish this my way. You gave them truth. I'm going to give her freedom. I haven't heard from her since. I don't know if she made it to Vermont or if she ever found Callie. I don't know if she even survived. What I do know is that every so often I get an anonymous email, no subject, no sender. Inside, just a photo. Grainy, distant, always in different places. A girl with dark hair, always walking away from the camera. Sometimes through a crowd, sometimes into the woods, sometimes sitting on a bench near a hospital. I can't be sure it's her, but deep down I believe it is. And I think she's watching, waiting, deciding if she can trust me again. If I'm someone she wants to be found by. After all this time, after all the pain, would she even recognize me? Would she want to? Alex and I don't live in that house anymore. After the footage leaked and the lawsuits began, the place became a circus. Reporters, protesters, even conspiracy theorists trying to connect our story to everything from MKUltra to secret government testing. We moved across the country, changed our names again, started over with less fear, but more weight. There are nights we don't speak, not because of silence, but because some memories don't need words. I still wake up at 3 a.m. some nights, certain someone's outside the window. I still check behind the mirror in hotel rooms, still flinch when I hear a knock at the door. That kind of trauma doesn't just go away, it settles in your skin. But I also smile more now. I laugh, even when it hurts. And sometimes, I find myself walking past a park or a hospital or a school and seeing a girl with dark hair, and for a split second, I think it's her. And instead of panic, I feel hope. The justice system moved slowly. Dr. M was finally arrested in Arizona under a false identity, hiding in plain sight as a behavioral consultant for a juvenile treatment center. He's awaiting trial now, but the full extent of his crimes, what he did to Callie, to me, to dozens of others, may never be fully known. Some wounds won't be healed in court, but the fact that he can no longer hurt anyone else, that matters. And the flash drive? The one we nearly died protecting? It now sits inside a vault at a nonprofit started by survivors of institutional abuse. It's become a symbol, a reminder, and sometimes a warning. Its contents have been archived, studied, and used to shape new protections and policies. For once, our pain meant something. Still, there are questions I'll never get answers to. What happened in the missing hours before the fire? Who erased my past? Why I was chosen to forget, while others were forced to remember. And above all, where Callie is now. But maybe not knowing is part of the truth too. Maybe closure doesn't come wrapped in answers, but in the decision to live forward even when the past still whispers. Maybe it's in choosing not to let the darkest part of our story be the one that defines us. So if you're still watching this, if you've followed every step, every secret, every lie, I want you to remember one thing. Some stories don't end when the screen fades to black. Some stories keep living, breathing, shifting, waiting for the right moment to return. And if you ever get a note on your doorstep that says, "Ask them about room 6, you'll know. This story was never just mine. It might have been yours all along.